You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. It's Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and that makes a folks fish show. Welcome to 16 years and nearly 2,500 episodes of the Chris Voss Show. And boy, I just flew in and my back is tired. My arms are tired, maybe. I think it's the better version of that joke. But we need you to, of course, always listen and support the Chris Voss Show podcast. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss for your family and friends. Go to facebook.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss. Chris Voss, one of the TikTokity and all those crazy places there are on the internet. Folks, we have an amazing young man on the show today. We're going to be talking about his hot new book that's coming off the presses in November 18th, 2025. It is entitled A Talent for Giving, Creating a More Generous Society That Benefits Everyone. That's a pretty good title. I like that. Who thunk it? John Studzinski did. We're going to have him on the show. We're going to be talking about his insights, his experience, and why this is a good idea to start being a more generous society, because we need all the help we can get. It's 2025. John commits his time to business, finance, and philanthropy. Since 2018, he has served as a managing director and the vice chairman of PIMCO, a global investment management firm. In his philanthropic activities, he actively emphasizes the importance of human dignity and the role of mentoring and active networks. He is the founder and chairman of the Genesis Foundation, a UK-based charity that supports emerging artists, commissioner of the UN Commission on Modern Slavery and Human Trafficking, chancellor of Leeds, Trinity University. In the U.S., he serves as a board member with the J. Paul Getty Trust, St. Patrick's Cathedral, and the Foundation for Art and Preservation in Embassies, and a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Oh, yeah, we've had a lot of people from the CFR on. He was awarded a CBE, Commander of the British Empire, for his services to arts and charity. Pope John Paul awarded him the Papal Knighthood, and for his work with the homeless and marginalized, and a Knight Commander of the Saint Sylvester. Boy, that's one I haven't got on my resume, the Knight Commander. That sounds awesome. And for his work in human rights. I love these titles. They're awesome. For 40 years of investment experience, he holds an MBA from the University of Chicago and a bachelor's degree from Bowdoin College. Welcome to the show, John. How are you?
Chris, I'm fine, although it sounds like it's not my biography. It sounds like it's my obituary. So let's hope
we knew John well.
Let's hope we have a few more things to talk about. But thank you for the kind introduction.
Thank you. Well, I introduced you as a young man, so you got plenty of years left. So, John, give us your .coms. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs to get to know you better?
Well, John.Studzinski at PIMCO, PIMCO.com.
So give us a 30,000 overview. What's inside your new book?
When I was 6 years old, I worked on my first project. My mother and I set up a food shelter for homeless people, basically a soup kitchen, because there was a need for it. We had very little money, and it was all about addressing a short-term problem. And my whole orientation in life has always been focused on trying to help people by dealing with not really money, but figuring out how you marshal your ties, your talent, your time, or your network. And I know this sounds all rather plain vanilla, but the reality is I wasn't really thinking very much. And a couple of years ago, I wrote an article in the New York Times saying every individual has been given God-given talent. We've all been given talent, and most of the time we don't know what our best talents are. And sometimes if we carefully think about talent, we can use that talent not for just making money and supporting our lives, but actually for helping other people and perhaps for helping the common good. I wrote an editorial. It was at Christmas time. And about 3 months later, the editor of Bloomsbury, publisher, contacted me and said, no one has written anything on entrepreneurial philanthropy, looking at the individual, what you can do to make a change at the grassroots level, to make a change in yourselves and in your society. And I think all the people listening to this have had a moment in their life when someone gave them a break, someone gave them a chance, someone believed in them. And perhaps that was to do with their talent or their network, or someone was just trying to be kind to them. And I wanted to turn that around and say, let's start encouraging people to stop thinking about philanthropy, about something someone else does, someone else who has a lot of money or a lot of power or a lot of prestige, but actually looking at your own individual self and say, okay, what's my talent? And can I use that talent to address a problem or an issue or something else? And, when I was in my late teens, Chris, I worked for 2 years with Mother Teresa in the leper colony in India, in Calcutta.
Wow.
And the thing I learned most there is, and I think this is something you very much relate to with your own ethos, and many people, you can only change the world one person at a time.
Yeah.
And I really do believe that, one person at a time. So sometimes when you're thinking of these big, grand schemes, you think, I can't do that. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. But sometimes projects can be very focused. They can start small. They can start incrementally. And, I'm also quite dedicated to the scriptures, both the Old Testament and the New Testament. And everybody, or many people listening to this, will be familiar with the parable of the talents. And of course, there's the one worker who's given 5 talents and produces 5. There's one who's given 3 talents and produces 3. And there's one who buries the talent in the ground and is chastised because he said, why did you bury it? You could at least given it to me and I could have gotten some market rate on it. But it's actually the talent that we often bury that is the one that can potentially produce, I believe, the greatest gift to society. And, you've got extraordinary listeners, and everyone is probably feeling, could I do more for the common good? And I think we're living in a society, not just in the United States or in Europe, but globally, where we've relied too much on corporations, too much on the government. And I think it's time to put this back into a grassroots mode, an individual mode, as to what we can do ourselves based on our own talent. And I'll shut up in a minute, Chris, because I'm talking too much. But the last thing I would say enthusiastically is, I believe in young people. I think young people are so much about the future. And when I interview young people between the ages of sort of 15 and 20, and I say, what are your passions? What would you like to do? Their eyes glaze over. But when I say, what are you angry about? Or what frustrates you? Or what gives you great anxiety? I get a long list of things. And then I sit down one-on-one with them and talk about how they might use some of their talent to address some of those issues and perhaps turn it into a project or an initiative that can actually help change the problem and support the common good.
And I mean, in doing that, this is kind of the thing that binds a lot of entrepreneurs to creating a better society or trying to create a better society. The hell hath no, what's the line about good intentions pay the way to hell? But jokes aside, we see problems in the world. We see things that are happening, whether it's a widget or whether it's a charity or something of that nature, and we go, hey, I want to fix that problem. And, we're usually paid in direct proportion to how well we fix that problem and its value to society and if we're successful in it. And you're right. It's something I think everybody needs to think about. Maybe and I like how you focus them on, okay, well, you don't like these things. and you're very angry about it, how can you fix it? How can you make the world a better place? And I think we all need to do that. It seems like, we used to live in this world that was built on abundance thinking instead of scarcity, where, rising tide lifts all boats. And we seem to have a society that started doing that at one point in time. And then I think somewhere in the 80s, we kind of reached that. Ivan Biosky, maybe put his finger on it when he said greed is good. And we kind of turned into the society of scarcity, it seemed, over time. And now we just, with the reduction of the middle class, you just see people fighting over scraps. And, we used to, and part of that society back then was one where, remember when everyone used to go to Peace Corps? Like that was kind of a thing you did when you left school. You went and did Peace Corps, you toured the world, you maybe did some of this charity work. I think John F. Kennedy, supported some of that stuff. But it seems like we've moved away from that now, where everyone's just maybe on the take, maybe so much. Is that my perception, or am I being negative?
I think it's actually, it's hard to generalize about that. I would say that social media is something that gives us, it gives us new types of communities to participate in, but people still inherently respond to human interaction and to what I call communities. And I think if you actually look at Generation Z, or 15 to 30-year-olds, they are actually migrating, they're plateauing more away from social media. They're re-engaging with faith and with some type of belief in a greater being. They are looking for, that Generation Z is often called the snowflake generation, it's interesting, Chris, they're talked about because they're seen to be hypersensitive, which is a sort of misleading notion, because people who are hypersensitive are actually closer to the human condition. They're closer to human beings. They understand human dignity more. And they're not necessarily fragile. They're just interested in another aspect of life, which is perhaps another aspect that it can disappear with too much technology or too much AI or too many things that people are less frustrated about. So I do think this generation is prepared to migrate back to taking more responsibility. And that's why I think, I wrote this book without that data that I've just put forth to you about people re-engaging more in human-to-human interaction. I did it again to encourage people to take more responsibility for themselves, because they all have the capability to do it. And let's be clear now, with resources that you have on the internet, resources you have with people like yourselves and others, people can be in a position to be much more creative and innovative on a whole range of things. And in my book, I use the word T a lot. It's not just about time, talent, and treasure that you hear about in the Bible, but it's also about things like technology, ties, or I call the power of two, which is mentoring. I think something that's really important, and I sense you've done this a lot in your life, is the power of mentoring, and actually sitting down with someone and telling them where they can help you and guide you and have a reciprocal relationship. The power of two is something which I do not underestimate. I think it's a very powerful tool for people to engage in understanding their talent, and how that talent again can be used to take forward some type of initiative.
Yeah. And you talk in the book about how there seems to be this kind of societal thing nowadays. You see a lot in news and articles and stuff. People are like, why aren't the billionaires paying more for taxes, whatever, and why aren't they doing this? And you talk in your book about how philanthropy isn't reserved for the ultra rich. Anyone, whether they're a teacher, an artist, an activist, or an executive, they have the talent where they can transform lives and make a difference. And tell us more about that. Like, have we become too focused on like the rich people need to pay and the poor people need to, I don't know, just have get free shit or something? I don't know.
I would say when I was thinking about the book, I was almost reluctant to use the word philanthropy at all.
Really?
And I tried to find a way not to use the word philanthropy, and I'll tell you why, Chris. Because if I said to you, when you think about philanthropist, you clearly do a lot of good for the world, but do you see yourself as a philanthropist?
No.
No. So if I get a group of young people together, they think that's somebody else who's very wealthy, that's very perhaps on another planet, someone who is so wealthy that has buildings named after them, university buildings named after them. And those are people who have projects, foundations, and initiatives. And, God bless those people. They're adding a lot to the world, and I don't take anything away from them. This is trying to basically say, don't rely just on these big pools of capital, these big pools of money. Take it upon yourself, because a good idea, and this is like in Menlo Park in Northern California, a good idea. Some people say to me, you need money to be a philanthropist. I say, actually, no. A good idea to solve a current problem or issue, come up with the idea, come up with the infrastructure, come up with the team, the money will come, because money will follow a good idea very quickly. And I've seen this in so many projects I've done recently in the US and in the UK on food security, on food banks, where you've created a network, identified a problem on food banks, for example, and immediately, either the food or the capital appeared, because people said, that's a good model. I want to support that model. Because we do have enormous numbers of, as you said, polarized wealth in the world and in the United States. And there are a lot of people who are looking for interesting ideas, and they're looking to partner with young, interesting, entrepreneurial philanthropists who want to help do something new. And I think that's really true. I would not, and I don't want to, this isn't about sort of being negative or being pejorative, or I can use another word, but I don't want to disparage your readers and your listeners. But it's not about sort of being negative about pools of capital. It's about basically saying, this is not about them. They're going to do it and I'm not. This is about everyone has the potential. Because what's interesting is, and you again have written about this, when you're generous and when you do something that has an impact on one life or many lives or has a domino effect, it has an extraordinary feeling. You get like it's more than a sugar high. I mean, it's an extraordinary experience when you find yourself doing something that is, I often use the word, you become a constructive disruptor. You do something that's disruptive in society that creates positive change. And that's good.
Yeah, most definitely good. One of my favorite sayings, and I discovered this early on when we started our companies, actually it was before that. It was somewhere around 2021. I discovered it. I was watching, I don't know, HBO special or something show, and they did a thing on Bobby Kennedy's Ripples of Hope speech. And one of my favorite quotes from it, where he quotes, "It is from numberless diverse acts of courage and belief that human history is shaped. Each time a man stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope, and crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, these ripples build a current that can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance." And I've given that plaque out in pictures to CEOs and friends of mine. I quote it. I think about it a lot. That each one of us can make a difference in the world, and whether or not we're yoked by that or we feel we're yoked by that, I think that it is our job. It is our job to leave this world as a better place. And, one person at a time, one thought at a time, sharing your ideals, not hiding your talents, as you talk about. And I think that maybe follows up to what you said. Tell us, feel free to expand on that. I don't want to not give you a response to that, but let's also talk about your upbringing. What shaped you? What got you through life and made you make the choices that you did that got you here?
Well, I was raised north of Boston, Peabody, Massachusetts.
And I brought in the Kennedys.
Yeah, no, well,
What a flow in there.
yeah, no, and yeah, no, and actually, Kerry Kennedy, Robert Kennedy's daughter, is a friend of mine,
Oh,
and
really?
she's a dear friend of mine, and actually, she's written a very positive comment on the book, so you can find that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, and she runs a very good human rights organization. Um,
Mhm.
but when I grew up in I'd say a working class family, my father was an accountant, my mother was a nurse. Both my parents were in the U.S. Army during World War II, and they were very, very. They spent. They really were in the army. They both worked hard in Europe. My father was very close to General Patton. He was actually his driver.
Wow.
And my mother met a number of interesting people from given in the medical side. We sort of brought up in a very and my grandparents were Polish immigrants, so we grew up with the view that we were grateful to be American. We had an element of service. My grandmother helped build the Catholic Church in Peabody, Massachusetts, and this is probably too much information. And I was born as a Catholic on St. Joseph's Day, so my middle name is Joseph, but my mother felt that was auspicious because, of course, Joseph is an important character in the Bible. So from an early age, I was very engaged in working with the homeless. When I was an adolescent, I set up a toll-free hotline it was the first toll-free hotline in 1968 for venereal disease in America. It was set up
Really?
for JTs. And we had billboards all across America that said 1 in 4 people will get venereal disease at some point in their life if they do not seek public health information. So this was a toll-free hotline. It was aimed at adolescents.
Wow.
And we got crews of public health nurses to work in it was actually in 48 states. And it was very effective. It was called Operation Venus. And so that was, again, very focused on dealing with an issue, because at that point in time, this was long before anyone heard of communicable diseases.
Yeah.
But it was a time, it was very constructive. But at that time, I got, again, engaged with people who were marginalized, people who were either afraid or not comfortable with their situation. So I did a lot of work with public health nurses in urban areas, particularly Boston.
What motivated you to start those first 2 companies? What was the motivation behind that? Was it money, or was it
No.
making a difference?
I was my mother brought me up with the notion that you should always be prepared to give the shirt off your back to someone who may need it more than you.
Wow. Well, that's different than what they teach kids nowadays.
Well, I know now they teach them, I guess, to order 2 more shirts on Amazon.
That
right?
or just, yeah.
Well, I don't know about that, but I think they're actually, I think one of the things, there are inherently enormous numbers of good people across America who are very generous, who are very forthcoming, and actually who do a lot, as you just said, sort of a lot of unidentified heroes who make people's lives different. So I've always had an ethos that, and I was very blessed. I had a good education. I was very, very lucky to go to Morgan Stanley and to get a very good Wall Street training. And I always believed, you're all familiar with that wonderful line, Chris, from the Bible, to whom much has been given, much is expected.
Yeah.
And to those who've been given much, even more is expected. And I'm very conscious of that. I'm very grateful. And I think when you've been given a lot, it's incumbent upon you to share it. And now there's another, you probably see that I kick off the book with a wonderful comment from a Roman poet that nothing is worth having unless you share it with others. And I do inherently believe that. I think we have a lot of things, and the thing you most should share is your talent. Because if you share your talent, again, you're going to you're sharing something that's has a sort of slightly spiritual, slightly magical element to it. You've had an extraordinary career with what you've done previously, and I'm sure that talent is something that has mentored and motivated a lot of people. Talent is something that can be shared and is actually can be very infectious. People can really learn from other people's talent, and I think that's part of the incentive of this book. The book, by the way, I should say, is written in the first person. It's philosophical, as you can tell from reading it. It's something that it's, and I thought about it a lot as my own statement. It's not. If anyone wants a commentary on contemporary philanthropy or something like that, this is not the book for you. This is really about how should you think about your own talent and how you might get some ideas from this book so that you yourself can do something.
And maybe one of the issues is, and it sounds like this is something you talk about in the book or allude to in the book, is people think about, philanthropy and giving and charity in terms of dollars. And really, what you're saying is that, you have talents. There are ways that you can give that don't have to be money. It doesn't have to be always a check, right? You can lift one person at a time, as we've talked about. Or you can make a difference with your voice. I mean, that's what we do with the podcast. We lift people up. We give them access to these authors and minds and give them data on how to do their stories. And sometimes just sharing your story makes all the difference. My audience has heard it a million times, but, some of the stories that I've shared on social media, I didn't want to share sometimes that were too personal, like the loss of my dog. When it happened one night, she went into a seizure and was gone. And it was a shock. It was a huge shock to me. And I poured it out on a social media post and sat there for half an hour looking at it going, do I really want to post this? This is really personal. Does anyone care? No one cares about my stupid little pity problem here. But I shared it, and in the way that I had written it and talked about it, people still remember it to this day, 10 years, 11, 12 years later. And by sharing my story, my experience, what I was going through, it changed so many lives where people were like, wow, I didn't realize that I didn't get closure with my, seeing what I went through. They didn't get closure with their father. They didn't get closure with a pet or a spouse, or, they kind of realized that, hey, and so sharing our stories sometimes is the best thing we can do. I mean, that's what you folks do as authors, or we folks do as authors, where we share our stories, and you never know who it's going to help, who it's going to motivate, the difference it's going to do. Sometimes just stopping and asking if somebody needs help, checking in if they're okay. When I go out and I shoot photography on Sundays, sometimes I'll shoot homeless people with a photographer camera. I got to quit saying the word shoot. I'll pass out water to them. I'll grab a case of water at the local 7-Eleven, pass it out. You can make a difference in so many ways, and they don't have to be, you don't have to write $1 million check to somebody out of your foundation. You can do the little things.
You're absolutely right. I spend Christmas morning every year in the night shelter I helped co-founded in London, The Passage. Christmas morning, I sit in the night shelter with mobile phones, and I get either children or parents or husbands or wives to call a member of their family. And of course, many of these people have dysfunctional, awkward, or totally destructive relationships, and they don't want to call them. And I sit there and go through, I have my ways of doing it, of dialing the phone and encouraging them, supporting them. And then you see the glow on their face when they actually have a connection. And I said, just wish them a happy Christmas. Wish them a Merry Christmas. And you have this moment where you get so much joy, which comes back. And, there's a wonderful, giving money alone is what I call checkbook philanthropy. You write the check and you sort of say, okay, get out of my life. Here's the money. I don't want to go to this dinner. I'm not interested in you. I'm not interested in your project, but here's $100. Okay, that's fine. there's a wonderful early Puritan expression that sits on a gravestone in Western Massachusetts that has become a great mantra. It's actually on a very famous author's gravestone. I'll tell you who the author is in a minute. But the expression is, you have what you gave. So everything you've given, you actually have. You never will lose that. You had what you spent. You lost what you kept. And that's on your gravestone. You have what you gave. So everything you've given in your life, whether it's time, talent, treasure, you'll always have that, Chris. And I believe that. It's always part of your balance sheet. It's always part of your life. It's always part of your heart and soul. It's you. You had what you spent. You spent your money on something and it's gone. And then everything you kept, when you're gone, you've lost that. That's no longer part of you. That goes to someone else.
That's true.
And that is on Herman Melville's gravestone. And I really think it's a very beautiful thing. And I've used it to teach people to think about their own lives as they get older and their balance sheet of life. You have what you gave. And gave is not just money. It's time, it's talent, it's ties, it's technology, it's your tenacity, anything. You have it, and you'll always have it. And the most important thing, Chris, is no one will ever take that away from you.
Yeah. The contributions you made to other people, and sometimes just being can make a difference. Sometimes just doing what you're doing. When we changed the format of the show 10 years in during COVID, or when the start of COVID began, and we decided we were going to talk about things that were more important about life and everything else. Like, we just talked about Silicon Valley and Google and Apple and Samsung and stuff before that. I interviewed a lot of CEOs, but I was like, I want to do something that changes the world and has a better effect and raises people's knowledge and their stuff. And so sometimes it's just raising your voice, like you spoke about with the talents. Don't bury your talent, raise your voice. And I think some people, you kind of alluded to that with the Gen Z, where when you talk to them, I think some people don't feel they have a voice, or they can't have a voice, or maybe they don't have a position to have a voice. I've had people say to me, I can't be a leader. I'm not the CEO. I'm like, everyone can lead. A parent leads. We all have leadership positions, and we all affect and influence each other, whether we like it or not. I mean, if you're driving down the road and someone cuts you off and you get really angry and honk at them, that has a down the line effect on everybody involved. So maybe we should learn to lift instead of better. Maybe you should, pull when they pull over, give them a student driver card so they can, take some courses or something. That's a good one. I should put that on windshields for people who park bad. So, I mean, but we all have influence, and maybe that's the thing that the other lesson we should get from your book is we have influence, whether we know it or not. And we can raise our voice, we can raise our talent, we can live our purpose. I mean, part of my purpose in life isn't just about me and rewarding me. It's about doing something bigger. With photography that I've recently gone back to, it's sharing images that change people's lives, or that gives a reflection of us on our thing. The comedy we do on the show is, comedy is a mirror to human nature. And sometimes shining that light, sharing a message, sharing a story, we all go through all these cathartic moments and times in life where we go through dark times. And sometimes those are the best times to start giving. Usually when I go through my cathartic times, I'm like, okay, we've lost whatever that was. And why don't we go, instead of worrying about our stupid little problems, go give and help some other people. And so sometimes I'll go for charity stuff around then. And sometimes it's the best time to give, because then you kind of learn a gratitude and a humbling for who you are, what you have. And, maybe it's time to worry about the world some more instead of yourself. I don't know. That's kind of how I think.
I think there's another element here, Chris, and I don't want to scare some of your listeners, but I think also when you give your time and you can volunteer. I'm very clear in the book that sometimes if you're trying to get engaged before you start a project, sometimes you want to get engaged in other projects to see how they function. And sometimes you shouldn't give money to something at all. You should ask to volunteer. And if they embrace you as a volunteer, if they'll train you as a volunteer, if they respect you as a volunteer, then you say, okay, this organization might be a good fit with me and for me. And if you volunteer, they'll train you. But then you start to say, well, what am I learning about myself? And it's an interesting exercise because you find when you volunteer, regardless with the gamut of society, you're holding up a mirror and you're seeing things in yourself perhaps that you haven't seen before. And I find whether I'm dealing with very sick people when I was working in India, whether I'm working with, I deal with a lot of survivors from modern slavery, from different parts of the world, or from people who are on the streets in London or New York. I find I learned so much about myself. And I think if more people realized that it's a rich experience, I think they would realize it's a much more therapeutic experience than paying money to a psychiatrist or a psychologist or anyone that's going to help you better understand yourself. You might find a lot, you learn a lot about yourself by virtue of putting yourself sometimes in uncomfortable positions. When I mentor young people, I always ask them, I said, you only grow by pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. And I think you need to push yourself outside of your comfort zone. You need to jump into the deep end of the swimming pool and learn how to swim in a different way. And I think sometimes when you do that in volunteering, dealing with different types of people, different types of situations, you do learn a different kind of your own skills, and you take your talent to another level. And some people think they have very good social skills. They might find out they need to improve their social skills. Some people might think they're very good listeners. Actually, the art of listening, as you know, because that's part of your day job, people can listen even more, because sometimes listening and pausing, you get much more information. And, I've sat next to homeless people in the shelter sometimes for 10, 15, 20 minutes before starting a conversation, because I just sensed it was not the right, I wasn't going to patronize anyone, and I wasn't going to be disruptive to their privacy or their dignity. And then finally I might say, are you going to sit here a little longer? If you are, I'll get you another cup of coffee or something like that. And just something very gradual. And then, you walk into the conversation, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, or sometimes you go right into the, tell me why you're here. And then sometimes I've gotten just to make a joke, sometimes look at me and say, tell me why you're here. Why are you here? You don't belong here. I've had people say to me many times, you don't belong here. You're not homeless. What are you doing here? And I say, well, that's a good point. Let's talk about that. And I'll listen to you. I said, why do you not think I belong here? And sometimes, and some of the best friends and trusted people I know now who work in the with homeless and marginalized people are people that I've had who've challenged me, and I've had to challenge myself into thinking about working with people at another level. So it's a much richer and deeper experience than some people realize. It's not you punch a clock and you hand out soup and have a nice time and everybody has a nice cup of tea and goes home at 5 o'clock. That isn't the real world when you're dealing with this type of program. But it is a really, I can't tell you enough, the things you learn about yourself, you learn about watching other people, and then the whole group dynamics about how people can quickly go from being independent to being part of a team. particularly if you watch these different cohorts, in these communities, because people are inherently community. They want to be in communities.
Mhm.
They may want to live, they may want to sleep in their own bedroom, but they want to eat in communities. They want to live in communities. And sometimes it takes you some time to figure out how to work within the community to be really effective. So I don't know. I don't know. You've probably spent as much time or more than I have. I've been doing this since I was 6 years old, but
Yeah.
I find it deeply rewarding, and I'm never. It's one area I'm actually more confident in my day job than I am when I work in the homeless shelter, because I'm always inevitably confronting something that is slightly new.
Mhm. That's amazing. Well, you're a living example, John, of what you're talking about, a talent for giving and everything else. As we go out, tell people maybe what they could do now. We want people, of course, to buy the book to find out more, but what's something someone could do now to be more generous, to change their paradigm of maybe feeling victimhood and maybe focusing on trying to lift all boats and stuff?
Well, I've written the book so that people don't have to. The chapters are short. I find that chapters that are too long are a little too intimidating. They're short. The chapters are aimed at, they don't have to be read in the order of beginning, middle, and end. You
Mm-hmm.
can read, they're all designed to help you look at a menu of different things that you might find. So I would encourage people, when they pick up the book, to pick one or two chapters and just read them, and then quietly think, how does this relate to my life, my network, my talents? And they may not use the word talent very often. They might use the word skill or my background. And it may also be something they want to share with their family, because I've had many people already who've looked at the book and they've actually sat with their children and asked their children how, as a family, can they do this as a family project, and actually find a project that will involve the whole family in looking at the talents within the family and how to mobilize that to sort of address something. And it's given families a chance already to talk about what they like and dislike about the world, about their community, about their church, about their city, about their town. And so it's, if anything, it's not about them. The book is aimed to help people have greater introspection into themselves and their own lives. And hopefully everybody who looks at the book can do something. I'm convinced of that. And I'd love to hear from them. I'd love to hear their thoughts on what aspect of nurturing talent or precipitating talent did they find the most stimulating or invigorating.
And you bring up a good point. It's something teaching your children and representing or showing your children how to lead in that sort of way and giving back. I'm just reminded by what you were talking about there. My parents would take us to old folks' homes, and we would sing and play piano. And there was some other people we'd take, and they had different talents of entertaining and stuff like that. And we would just go and commiserate with them and lift them up, give them hope, and make them feel visited and stuff. It was a very simple gift, and it didn't take any money. It took time and effort, but it taught us at a very young age to give and the importance of it. Well, John, this has been very inspiring. As we go out, give people your final thoughts, where to pick up the book, and any .coms you want them to find you at.
Chris, thank you very much. It's on Amazon. They can pre-order it on Amazon. It's not available again until November 18th. And it's John, John. Studzinski, Studzinski, at pimco.com. And I think I almost regard this book as a pilot, Chris. And I'm hoping that you and I can have a conversation in the future, and maybe some of your listeners can share some of the stories as to what motivated them, what encouraged them, what really excited them to do something. Because I'm nothing special, but I've just managed to try to move things along, and other people can do the same.
Everybody, we need to contribute and lift all boats. Thank you very much, John, for coming on the show and sharing your wonderful message with us and book.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thanks, John, for tuning in. Order up the book wherever fine books are sold, folks. It is entitled A Talent for Giving, Creating a More Generous Society That Benefits Everyone. Out November 18th, 2025. I love it. The rising tide lifts all boats. And if we look at each other from an aspect or mindset of abundance rather than scarcity, it changes your whole world and what you contribute in it. Anyway, guys, go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Facebook.com/Chris Voss. Chris Voss won the TikTok, and all those crazy places the Chris Voss Show is at. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you guys next time. And that shows out, John.